As you all know, I've enjoyed over the last several months sharing occasionally about Tom, a fellow who owns the best auto repair and body shop in 5 counties, and he's based in Doe Run in East Texas behind the pine curtain. He is a great storyteller. Now, he has networks of people he has known over the years across the 5 counties. He knows them and knows their stories. He knows the community stories. He knew his grandparents and 3 great-grandparents, and numerous aunts and uncles and cousins. So, people that he's known, families he's known, and the tales they tell, he collects them. He has a whole, just a bankload of them. Now, there are many tales that could be told and are best left unsaid. But nevertheless, there are many stories that are very helpful to tell. And it's interesting that when he tells a story, to see Tom sort of the unofficial counselor for the community, and what details he will present when he tells a tale, and what ones he doesn't, or what he emphasizes and doesn't emphasize. He varies it to his audience to help make his point. Now, there's a rather long chapter. We're not going to go in details today about the time he had opened up the the body shop. He already had auto repair, inherited that from his father, but he got the body shop and he got it going. And a couple of years into it, they went through a challenging period, and that's actually a set of stories. Won't go into it today. But years later, he will speak of that period, and based on the audience, certain things he will emphasize. In one case it was, maybe he was talking to a couple, maybe talking to the wife. He talks about the way that his wife believed in him and supported him. It emphasizes the incredible power that a wife has as a husband's cheerleader. Sometimes, based on the circumstance, he talks about once things had calmed down, his wife had a particular dream she wanted to pursue, and why he helped her do that. She was there for me. She's the greatest asset I've ever had, and I need to be there for her too. So same story, but he kind of shifts the details. During that time, he got some sage advice from several older men, and he will share that, sometimes making the point, I listened, and sometimes sharing the particular insight. And then on other times, he talks about what he learned and even how his faith grew through that Sunday school lesson as well. Once talking to somebody going through a dark night of the soul and saying, well, this is what I was going through and what I learned. Same story, basically, but what details are told, emphasized, not told, de-emphasized, based on the situation. Now, I do all of that to say, as we look at this account in John, we actually have accounts in Matthew and Mark. And I want to look at those with John and then say, what are the lessons that we can find for us today? Well, this begins in John's account that Jesus, just before this, has had an incredible time feeding the 5,000. Y'all able to hear last week, heard Reverend Craig talk about that. The interesting thing about that miracle is the only miracle that appears in all 4 Gospels. I may have missed something when I looked at my study Bible last night, but I was double-checking it last time. It looked like, that's the only one that makes it into all 4 Gospels. In John's account, it said that the people wanted to make Jesus a king of sorts, not the direction he wanted things to go. So he dismissed them, and he slipped away, sent the disciples on, maybe thinking, they're going to follow the disciples, not me. Well, let's do it out this way. And then Jesus spent some time in prayer. And actually, all 3 accounts will talk about Jesus spending time in prayer. And that's good. It must have been exhausting. He needed to reconnect. It's a healthy and good reminder that we need, all of us need, that time to slip away and to reconnect. Now, when it comes to this boat story, some of you might be thinking, isn't there something missing? And if so, it's because we're used to Matthew's account. Matthew, when he's telling the story, talks about the storm coming up and Jesus saying, take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. And then Peter saying, if it's you, Lord, let me come out and walk on the water with you. And he says, come, and Peter walks, he's looking at Jesus. But then he looks at what's around him. He loses heart, gets confused, starts to fall into the water, and Jesus has to pull him out. Again, that's Sunday school, vacation Bible school, that's the story we often hear. It's a good point is that Jesus, so was Peter, as long as he was focused on Jesus, was doing well. When he lost his focus and focused on the circumstances, he was getting overwhelmed by them. Anyway, Jesus calms the waters, and the disciples worship Jesus and say, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Mark's account, he says, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." And he got into the boat. There is no reference to Peter. He got into the boat. The wind ceased. They're utterly astounded. And it says they did not understand about the loaves. Mark is always going to emphasize the disciples not getting it. John, is the other extreme, will always emphasize how the disciples are getting it. And Matthew and Luke are somewhere in between. And that reminder that we have these great moments of insight. And then there are these moments when it's one to just say, excuse me, big fly, anybody there, in terms of getting it. It's how we live our lives. And so again, how it's emphasized. But Mark emphasizes them not getting it. In this, we're reminded that we can trust Jesus. Basically saying, take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. You can trust Jesus even in the storms of life. And I cannot help but think about the storms of this past year. This is marking our first week anniversary of the 12 months of Corona. And actually, it was March 22nd that we did our first pre-recorded here. Everybody was home. But we had a team to record a service on that Sunday before we went to Saturday. We all have storms of life. Last night, I doing some kind of odds and ends, and so listening to the Grand Ole Opry, and had a young singer talk about her year of being 29. I think she's just now turned 30. And I don't know all the circumstances. I did go to Wikipedia, get a little bit of it. But basically, in that year, she got married, and 8 months later, she was divorced. Don't know what the story was, but it was apparently something had not happened. And the point was, just being very honest, this was a storm I did not expect, and this is not what I expected at 29. I expected to finally have it together, and I don't. It's a storm of life she is going through. In John's account, we see that evening has come. Jesus has gone off to be by himself, sent the disciples along, and they're starting to cross the sea, and it is dark. It's not good to be on the water. It's dark. And my father loved to sail, and there was actually a twilight race series in which he would participate, but that was it. It was the twilight, and you wrapped it up. The courses were such that you wrapped it up. The sun was setting. You had a block of time, and you got the race done. You might be heading back to land when it's dark, but you got your lights on, and you're watching, and there are lights on at the dock. Well, they don't have lights on at the dock, darling. It is different at night. I think back years ago in Georgia, church to the church family retreat at Norman Park, a conference center between Moultrie and Sylvester. First time I drove down and had Mary Lee with me, and took the back road. It's basically like a farm road, okay? But from Sylvester, came in the back way. Now, she grew up in Hartford, Connecticut, and lived in Atlanta and Dallas and Lake Highlands and in Columbus. And so she's used to having lights. Okay? You drive at night, there are lights. Yes, in the city. We're out in the country. And I was used to it, so I knew what to expect. So that's why you have your lights on your car. And she's like, gosh, how can you manage? You look in front of you. But anyway, not trying to pick on her. It was a new experience for her. And it is tough driving at night in the country because it is dark. And they are in the boats in this kind of stuff. Now, I'm sure as fishermen, they've been there before, and sometimes it's because you do know what can happen. That's the scary part. Sometimes ignorance is bliss. The storm comes up, and the way the hills around that very, very large lake, Sea of Galilee, there's a little microclimate, and certain storms can come up very quickly. They know, these are fishermen. They know this. They know where it can go. They know what they can manage, but they know it can get worse. And this is what they're doing. They're rowing so hard. And it is getting scarier and scarier. It's one thing just to be scared because you don't know what's going on. Another thing to be scared because you know what could happen, and that's where they are. And once again, Jesus says, "It is I, do not be afraid." Here, John's gospel centers on the relationship. It's not the fear as much. I mean, it's mentioned, it's referenced, but it's not really emphasized. Here, it's not even a miracle. It's I, do not be afraid. And they willingly receive him. Yes, come on into the boat. And they got where they were going. The flow is pretty simple. Jesus is apart, Jesus appears, and they accept. They receive Jesus back into the boat. From these accounts, we get basic good reminders. One is about our focus, focusing on Jesus. It's easy to get sidelined. And then a reminder about our fear, not letting our fear get the best of us, but focusing on Jesus. It's all well?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an Amber Alert.
Amber Alert, okay. All right. So I could imagine, you're actually on the boat and the phone went off. I mean, that'd be kind of scary too. Here I am in the boat. Anyway, fear, not let the fear get the best of them. And this has been a year of a lot of fear. I was looking at I write the Christmas newsletter for the family. And as I had summarized 2020, and I talked about it in phases, and of course, mentioned the first couple of months, life before. And then referred to the stages that followed as a cautious retreat, cautious re-entry, cautious re-engage, and then cautious return as the year moved along. Then I see from here about fellowship. There is focus, there's fear, but there's also fellowship. The relationship. They received Jesus back into the boat, reestablishing that connection. It leads me to ask a very honest question about that. Where is my fellowship with Christ in all of this? How am I doing there? How is that working? The miracle shows the power of Jesus over nature. And it was important as one of the 7 miracles recorded in John. It's a very specific reason that he does that. More than that, it shows the importance of focusing on Jesus, not our circumstances. Even if nothing else, it reminds us the difference about fear versus caution. And the fellowship versus chaos or disconnection. As I said earlier, the thing I like about Tom, back in the body shop and auto repair, is the way he'll tell his stories and the way he emphasizes points in the story to make his point to the people around him. From this account in the Gospel of John and hearing the other accounts, you may have your own particular point you need to hear today. Maybe you feel like you're on the boat and you're rowing and you know about the storms and you're just tired. And you need that time away. Even if it's, hey, for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to carve out 20 minutes and just be quiet every day.